Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you're part of our journey. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and get ready for a story that will leave you thinking. And if you love inspiring tales, a like goes a long way. She doesn't belong here. Those words sliced through the barbershop like a razor's edge. The mother's grip tightened around her daughter's small hand as the child rocked slightly, humming to drown out the radio's static. Heads turned, eyes darted away, and scissors paused mid-snip in the sudden, heavy silence. The barbershop smelled of aftershave and judgment. Outside, the city rushed by indifferently, yellow cabs honking, pedestrians hurrying past the steamy windows. Inside, time had frozen around the woman and her daughter standing awkwardly by the reception counter, the child's fingers fluttering like trapped butterflies as the barber's words hung in the air. In the third chair, partially visible in the wall-length mirror, a man in a black jacket lowered the motorcycle magazine he'd been reading. His eyes, dark and attentive, moved from the mother's flushed face to the child's downturned eyes, then to the barber's impatient scowl. Nobody recognized him yet, but in moments, everyone would remember this day as the time Keanu Reeves taught them what real kindness looks like. If this moment made you feel something, imagine what's coming next. Hit that like button and stay with us. Subscribe now. The mother's voice trembled but remained gentle. Please, she's just nervous about the noise. Sophie's been practicing for this haircut for weeks. She knelt beside her daughter, who continued rocking, small hands covering her ears now. The girl wasn't crying, just retreating inward, her eyes fixed on the checkerboard tiles as if counting each black square might protect her from the overwhelming sensations. The barber crossed his arms, scissors dangling from his fingers like an accusation. Look, I'm not equipped for special needs. She's moving too much. It's dangerous. His voice carried that artificial patience adults use when they've already made up their minds. There are specialized places for kids like her. The way he said it made specialized sound like separate, and everyone knew what he meant. A man waiting by the magazine rack sighed loudly. Some of us have schedules, he muttered, loud enough to be heard but soft enough to maintain plausible deniability. The barber nodded in agreement, emboldened by the support. Other patrons shifted uncomfortably, eyes locked on phones, pretending not to witness the humiliation unfolding in their midst. One woman gathered her purse, apparently deciding her split ends were preferable to this discomfort. The mother blinked rapidly, fighting tears. It took months for her to be ready, she explained, her voice shrinking. The social stories, the practice at home with the buzzer sounds. She placed a protective arm around Sophie, who had begun to hum louder, a self-soothing rhythm that seemed to irritate the barber even more. His eyes narrowed, jaw clenching as if her coping mechanism was a personal affront. I'm not a nurse, the barber declared with finality. Maybe try a home haircut. Someone snickered, and the sound seemed to puncture something essential in the mother's composure. She began gathering their things, whispering reassurances to Sophie that another day would be better, though her eyes betrayed the lie. This wasn't just about a haircut. It was about one more door closing, one more ordinary experience denied. In the mirror's reflection, the man in the third chair set his magazine down completely. Keanu Reeves had entered the barbershop without fanfare, baseball cap pulled low, seeking the anonymity that celebrities crave. He'd been enjoying the normalcy until now. His barber paused mid-cut, following Keanu's gaze in the mirror. Something in the actor's expression had changed, a quiet intensity forming behind those famously kind eyes as he watched the mother's shoulders slump in defeat. Things are about to take a turn. Don't miss what happens next. Subscribe, like our video, and keep watching. The movement was subtle at first, Keanu raising his hand, causing his barber to pause. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying that distinctive gentle cadence fans would recognize anywhere. Heads turned, eyes widened with recognition. The barbershop quieted instantly. "May I ask what's happening here?" His question wasn't confrontational but curious, delivered with the same thoughtful tone he might use discussing philosophy. The barber stammered, suddenly conscious of his audience. "Mr. Reeves, this child has special needs. She won't sit still for a haircut." His confidence faltered under Keanu's steady gaze. "It's a safety issue, you understand." Sophie's mother froze halfway to the door, her daughter still humming beside her. The other patrons were suddenly alert, phones discreetly shifting to camera mode. The atmosphere electric with celebrity presence and unfolding drama. "Safety?" Keanu repeated, as if considering the word's true weight. He turned in his chair, cape still draped around his shoulders, half his hair trimmed. "Would you mind if I hear more about this?" The question wasn't directed at the barber, but at Sophie's mother, who blinked in disbelief as Keanu Reeves, the John Wick, the Neo, the internet's beloved breathtaking meme, waited for her response. "Sophie's autistic," the mother explained, returning to the center of the shop with newfound courage. "She's been preparing for this haircut for months. The noise and sensations are overwhelming for her, but she really wants her hair cut like the other kids." Her voice gained strength with each word. "She's not being difficult. Her brain just processes things differently." Keanu nodded thoughtfully, a gesture so genuinely attentive it made the barber's previous dismissal seem even crueler by contrast. "May I meet Sophie?" he asked. The mother hesitated, then nodded. Keanu rose slowly, abandoning his own haircut to approach them, careful to move without sudden gestures. He crouched to Sophie's eye level, not demanding eye contact, but offering his presence. "Hello, Sophie," he said softly. "I'm Keanu." The girl continued rocking, but adjusted her humming pattern, a subtle acknowledgement. "I get nervous at haircuts too," he continued, surprising everyone with his candor. "The cape feels tight sometimes, and those buzzers are really loud, aren't they?" Sophie's fingers stopped fluttering for a moment, her eyes briefly darting toward him then away. Phone cameras captured the moment, though most lowered their devices, suddenly ashamed of treating this interaction as entertainment. Keanu turned to address the barber, who now stood awkwardly clutching his scissors. "I have an idea, if you're willing." His tone was collaborative rather than confrontational. "What if we made it work together?" The barber glanced nervously at the other customers, at his schedule book, at the tools in his hand. Anywhere but at Sophie. The silent judgment around him was shifting, celebrity presence transforming social dynamics in real time. "I don't know how to cut." The barber gestured vaguely at Sophie. Keanu's expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes hardened ever so slightly. "Cut her hair," he finished the sentence simply. "You just need to cut her hair, like anyone else's hair." The simplicity of the statement hung in the air, a gentle but unmistakable correction. A woman waiting her turn suddenly stood up. "My nephew is on the spectrum," she offered. "Sometimes headphones help block the buzzer noise." Another client spoke up. "My sister's kid doesn't like the cape either. They just use a towel instead." The atmosphere transformed as people began offering suggestions instead of judgment. Sophie's mother watched in amazement as the barbershop, the same space that moments ago had been closing around them like a trap, expanded with possibility, all because one person had chosen to see her daughter as worth accommodating. This story is only getting deeper. What would you do in this situation? Comment below, and let's talk. The barber wavered, caught between his initial refusal and the shifting tide of the room. Pride wrestled with shame on his face. "I suppose we could try," he conceded, though his reluctance remained visible. Keanu's unfinished haircut dripped water onto the cape as he stepped fully into the situation. Not as a celebrity, but as a human being witnessing another human being's struggle. "What if we make it fun?" Keanu suggested, addressing Sophie directly even as she avoided eye contact. "What if we treat it like a movie scene?" Something about his words seemed to interest her. Her rocking slowed slightly. "In movies, we break big challenges into small parts. We practice each part until it feels okay, then put them together." Sophie's mother looked at him with grateful surprise. He was speaking the language of her daughter's therapy without realizing it. The barber hesitantly approached, clippers still in hand. "I could demonstrate on myself first," he offered, the question in his voice revealing his uncertainty. Yet something was changing in him too, professional pride giving way to problem-solving. Keanu nodded encouragingly. Other patrons began clearing space, rearranging chairs to create a quieter corner away from the main buzz of activity. The woman who'd mentioned headphones offered hers. Someone dimmed the overhead lights slightly, reducing the sensory input. "Sophie, would you like to touch the clippers while they're off?" Keanu asked, taking them gently from the barber. "In movies, we get to know our props." He demonstrated by touching the cool metal himself, then holding them out. Not pushing, just offering. Sophie's mother whispered something in her daughter's ear. After a moment's hesitation, Sophie reached out one finger to quickly tap the clippers before pulling her hand back. A small victory, but Keanu grinned as if she'd accomplished something monumental. The barber, watching this interaction, began to understand. He pulled up a chair. "I could cut just one small piece first," he suggested, his voice softer now, "just to see how it feels." He looked to Sophie's mother for guidance, a complete reversal from his earlier dismissal. She nodded, encouraging him to continue speaking directly to Sophie rather than around her. "Would you like to sit in the big chair, Sophie?" the barber asked. "Or maybe your mom's lap might feel safer?" He was problem-solving now, seeing challenges instead of burdens. Sophie pointed to her mother's lap. "Great choice," the barber affirmed, arranging things accordingly. Keanu stepped back, letting the moment unfold. Though he remained nearby, a reassuring presence as Sophie and her mother settled into position. Sophie flinched at the first sound of the clippers, her humming increasing in volume. But her mother held her gently, and the barber paused, letting her adjust before continuing. "You're doing great, Sophie," Keanu encouraged from where he stood, "just like a movie star in the makeup chair." Sophie's humming incorporated his words somehow, a musical acknowledgement that made everyone smile. The barber worked slowly, with newfound patience. Each small section of hair became a separate scene in their movie production. "Cut," Sophie would sometimes whisper when she needed a break, a director calling the shots in her own experience. And everyone respected it, waiting until she gave a tiny nod to continue. The waiting customers didn't complain. They were transfixed, witnesses to something more meaningful than a celebrity sighting. When the final snip fell, the barbershop erupted in spontaneous applause. Sophie covered her ears, but she was smiling, a quiet, contented expression. The barber stepped back, surveying his work with professional pride now mingled with something deeper. "Perfect," he declared, and meant it. Sophie's mother's eyes brimmed with tears as she mouthed, "Thank you," to Keanu, who simply nodded in return. The haircut wasn't just about looking different. Sophie stood straighter, touching her new style with curious fingers, having conquered a world that for once had bent to accommodate her instead of demanding she change. "It's not over yet. The best part is coming," Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. Back to my haircut, Keanu suggested to his barber, returning to his chair as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But everything had changed. The barbershop hummed with a different energy now. Customers chatting openly about accessibility, about their own family members with different needs, connections forming where isolation had existed before. Sophie and her mother prepared to leave, dignity and accomplishment replacing the shame that had nearly driven them out. The barber approached them at the register, waving away the mother's credit card. "On the house," he insisted, then added more quietly, "and I'd like to learn more. For next time." He glanced at a pamphlet in the mother's purse about autism awareness. "Maybe you could leave some of those here," he suggested, "for other customers to understand better." His transformation wasn't performative. There was genuine remorse in his eyes, and a determination to do better. Before leaving, Sophie's mother approached Keanu, whose haircut was now being finished. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly, emotion making her voice unsteady. Keanu shook his head slightly. "I didn't do anything special," he replied. "I just didn't see why she should be treated differently." The simplicity of his perspective highlighted how profound it actually was. Not heroics, just humanity seeing a child first, not her diagnosis. Outside, people had gathered, word spreading through social media that Keanu Reeves was inside. But what would trend online by evening wasn't celebrity gossip. It was the story of how a famous actor had paused his day to ensure a child was treated with dignity. A few customers who had witnessed everything emerged to find themselves interviewed by passers-by, each retelling making the moment more powerful than the last, the lesson clearer with each sharing. Days later, the barbershop had transformed. A small sign appeared in the window. "Sensory-friendly appointments available." The barber had reached out to local autism support groups, learning simple accommodations that cost nothing but meant everything. Sophie's experience had rippled outward, changing not just one business but starting conversations throughout the community about inclusion as a choice we make daily. Keanu Reeves never mentioned the incident in interviews. He didn't need to. The moment wasn't about his celebrity, but about his humanity. A quiet reminder that true kindness requires no audience. But for Sophie, who now touched her hair with pride each morning, the message was clear. The world hadn't made her fit in. For once, the world had made room for her exactly as she was. And somewhere in that simple shift was the most profound lesson of all, that compassion isn't extraordinary. It's what makes us human in the first place. Wow, what a story. If this moved you, imagine what else we have for you. Hit that like button, drop a comment, and let us know what you think.